Manson's notoriety came from a night, the summer of 1969, where the Manson murders occurred. Let's hear from Patricia Krenwinkel right now about what happened that night.
Rooms, and what began to happen is a scuffle started taking place between Tex and the man and Jay Sebring, and he shot him, and everyone else at that point obviously was getting really frightened and scared. And what eventually took place is that there was an attempt to tie everyone up. And when there was an attempt to tie everyone up, eventually Abigail Folger started to get herself undone, and she took off. I ran after her with an upraised knife, and we went out through a back door out onto the lawn. And I started stabbing her. I ran her down, and I began to stab her. I remember her saying, "I'm already dead."
Wow, so there's a lot to unpack. The bulk of these murders occurred over 2 nights, but a lot of people feel that the whole plot kicked into place after Charles Manson felt that he had murdered a drug dealer who was black, who he also thought was a Black Panther, and he thought that the race war was imminent and they needed to kind of kick it off. But like we've talked about before, these murders would have happened anyway. So on this night, they went over to what he believed was Terry Mulcher's house, but indeed, it was actually the house of actress Sharon Tate, who was married to Roman Polanski at the time. That's a picture of Sharon Tate, who was a beautiful actress. She was pregnant, and there were other people at the house with her. And this is a bad word to describe it, but it was a shitstorm of a murder. It was planned, it was orchestrated by Manson, but there was no order here. You know, I mean, you hear Patricia Krenwinkel in the video, they were kind of tying up Abigail Folger, who was actually the heiress to the Folger, you know, the best part of waking up.
Continue.
Okay, just making sure she's the coffee heiress. And then there was a hairdresser there as well. And then Tex was, you know, there was a guy who was just checking on the house, the groundskeeper. So many people were killed in an incredibly messy way. And then sort of
attempt to kill someone else.
Right.
That wasn't even present.
Right. And then it was overkill. And you see these girls on crazy drugs, tripping out, just stabbing the shit out of everyone. You know, I mean, Abigail Folger saying, "I'm already dead," you know, and you have this woman just chasing after her. I don't know. I can't this is one of the few murder cases that I've studied where I can't make sense of it.
I think you're trying to bring reason and like, why wasn't this more cold and calculated to 4 random chicks trying to murder someone?
Yeah.
Like, they have no idea what they're doing. It's not like they trained for it. Mm-hmm. It's some drug-addled, almost children, thinking that death is what has to be done for Charles, for our God.
Right.
That's not going to be clean. Mm-hmm. You know, you see like in every show about it, like show about murders and stuff, they say like, "Oh, this was amateurish." Mm-hmm. And that's what that was. They never killed anybody. I bet they never even like killed an animal. They're not serial killers.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Which is what makes the story even more tragic.
So here, let's throw up some crime scene footage. Some crime scene photos from the scene. This is a photo right here of Sharon Tate's body on the floor. You can see that there was the rope that was sort of loosely tied around her neck that was then hanging from a beam overhead. And then the next night, following the Tate murders, LA was freaking out.
Yeah.
People were, I mean, it was crazy. And not to mention the fact that they wrote pig, you know, that they were writing stuff in the blood of these victims. And then the very next night, Charles sent them out again to kill the LaBiancas, a totally different part of town, totally random killing. The LaBiancas
seemed totally unrelated,
right,
to the police.
Yeah, seemed completely unrelated. And that was the 2 LaBianca family members. They were just, you know, citizens. They weren't famous or anything, just a grocery store owner. So this is a photo from that. That's Mrs. LaBianca right there. And then right here we have Mr. LaBianca with war carved into his chest. So what we were seeing with this second murder, the first murder I think was Yeah.
To put that
Jack
that
just put the
lovely
Sharon
picture
Tate
of Sharon Tate
photo
over all those dead people.
Over all the dead body photos. Good, probably
Yeah.
for the best. So I think the first murder we can speculate was something that Charles ordered out of rage and fear. Rage, let's fucking kill Terry Melcher. Fear, a race war is about to start. And I might have just started it because I might have just killed this drug dealer who was a Black Panther. Second,
The ego on that of like, I'm starting the race war.
yeah.
And that's his whole MO, is he's God. And it makes you wonder if he believed it or if it was how he just got laid a bunch. And that's kind of the why we're still talking about Manson to this day is, did he drink his own Kool-Aid? Or was he kind of like a televangelist who's like, yeah, I get a jet if I tell everyone to send me like $2? Or did Manson think he was God?
You know, and there also are varying reports on how much of the drugs that he was giving to his girls
That
did
he was
he
taking,
really do.
if he was even doing it.
Yeah, because it would be very difficult to have orchestrated this with the level of clarity that he did have had he been as drug-fueled as his followers so clearly were.
Yeah, if he could manipulate them in that intoxicated state.
Right.
Or if he just took advantage of his followers.
Right. So the second night of the murders, we see this is much more about inciting helter-skelter.
Yeah.
That's actually when we see helter-skelter for the first time written on the fridge at the LaBianca household in blood again. But strangely enough, which this does seem strange to me, the police did not connect the two murders. They thought that one was kind of a clear copycat because of what had happened with the Tate murders, and they were in different parts of town. One was a fabulous movie star. Why are you laughing when I say different parts of town?
I just love the idea of like a bunch of cops in 60s LA being like, yeah, kill someone in Brentwood and in Echo Park. No, that couldn't happen. Let's look at some new ideas.
But that's probably what it was.
They drove 11 miles? No
one would, in traffic these days, they wouldn't drive.
I see it so clearly, actually.
Yeah, no, it's true, because we would have connected it, and obviously...
No, we would not have.
We would have connected it. I think I would have.
You know what?
The
I would
writing.
have seen it. They both wrote stuff, so they're
Yeah.
probably related.
Weird stuff like pig, war, helter skelter. You wouldn't have connected that?
That guy wrote Pig. That guy wrote a Beatles song. My kid likes the Beatles. He plays this song a lot.
All right, fair point. Fair point.
The ego on you.
Fair point. So
I would have solved the Manson
I
murders
would have been
day one.
I know, that's why I was like, give me a show, I'll solve them. Give me a show, I'll do these murders. So another interesting part of this case was that the police were having issues connecting this stuff.
Yeah.
And you know who actually gave it away were the girls themselves.
Yeah.
When they were behind bars for an unrelated charge.
It's like Grand Theft Auto or something.
Yeah, it was Grand Theft Auto. They thought that they'd kind of gotten away with it. Wouldn't you know?
After like a week.
Yeah. Wouldn't you know, Susan Atkins started bragging about how much she loved to kill. And I think that you, before we were on the air, we were talking about, you said something like he turned them into these blabber monsters,
Yeah.
and that's what they did.
He made psychos and then hoped that they acted appropriately, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
He made his own monsters on both ends of it.
Yeah.
He turned these women into semi-human.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, never lie, never lie, never lie. I'm never going to lie to you. Like, that's what love is. That's how you should act. You should always be truthful. And then they were.
Yeah, then
And
they
that
told the
undid him.
truth.
Yeah.
And that is what did them in. And that actually brings us to the trial, which previous to, I would say, the O.J. Simpson trial was absolutely
It's
the trial
definitely
of-
lasted the longest in the public consciousness, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're still talking about that, and up until those FX shows like last year, we weren't really talking about OJ.
Yeah.
But we get the news report every time one of them goes up for parole, like they did 2 weeks ago. This was 40 years ago. Who gives a shit?
And let's talk a little bit about this trial and why America was so fascinated. Here's a photo of some of the behavior of his followers. So
This
that's
is the best part.
Yeah.
This is the best part of all of Manson's story.
The trial and
Yeah.
how his followers responded. And so this is a picture that you guys are seeing right now of Leslie Van Houten, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Susan Atkins, who shaved their head in solidarity with Charles Manson, who was giving them orders of what to do, you know, how to carve an X into your forehead to remove yourself from society during the trial. And his followers were doing the same thing. So here's another picture of girls outside, sitting outside the courtroom because they weren't allowed in the courtroom. They were causing too much of a scene.
Yeah.
And then they weren't allowed in the hallway. They were causing too much of a scene.
They crawled on their hands and knees with shaved heads up to the courtroom. Like, that is, guys can't get girls to text them. And Charles Manson was like, just crawl on your hands and knees with shaved heads. And they're like, cool, like, do you want us to bring you like lunch? Like, what else do you need? That's otherworldly depths of psychosis that he created in these people.
And I mean, it's worth mentioning that they were singing songs, that they took all their lead with regard to how to defend themselves from Manson, which ultimately really fucked them over initially, because they weren't striking deals. They weren't listening to reason. They were listening to Manson. And Manson, even though he was denied the ability to be his own counsel, he was very much running that trial. You know, I mean, he fired so many of his defense lawyers. He made it impossible to deal with them.
He's a cult leader and continued to act like a cult leader.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and
He
I
can't
think
be out of power.
right. And to this day, here I'm going to throw up a picture of throughout the years of Charles Manson in and out of court. To this day, we see these bizarre courtroom antics, and fortunately, the girls have basically calmed down and they can give coherent interviews. But Manson is still absolutely crazy. And to give you an idea of this, let's toss to a video right now. This is an interview with Charles Manson recently.
I tried to stop Nixon, and I stopped him dead in his tracks. I tried to stop the Vietnam War, and I did it. And I was convicted for being the father of this country. And all the things I did without breaking the law. Maybe I haven't done enough. I might be ashamed of that, for not doing enough.
As you get a lot of mail from people who want to follow you still.
Follow me? Did you have any choice? You'll all follow me. I don't, you know, you got these people over here that want to live. You want to live? Get in line, we'll live. You don't want to live? Hurry up.
Can you imagine if they did an interview like that today, where it's just like Megyn Kelly is just like talking to a serial murderer and he's just like smoking a cigarette and sitting up on the table like he's not chained or anything. And she's like, well, how'd you feel about this murder? Like, what? That can't happen anymore. Like, we physically cannot do these A&E and MSNBC
No,
videos.
you don't have that sort of access anymore. I'm surprised that people give him as much airtime as I was able to find on the internet, because he is truly incoherent.
We love talking about him.
Yeah, we do love talking about him. And I think another thing that I want to point out before we talk about the kind of the larger endpoints and social ramifications of Manson is his defense lawyer. One of his defense lawyers was mysteriously found dead during the trial. So Manson obviously didn't murder him, but I think it's worth bringing up because
adds to the ethos.
It does add to the mystery of this guy and his connections, sort of inside jail and prison, and then also outside.
He's still orchestrating.
To this day,
stuff.
he's still orchestrating. He has this power, even though we've just seen how much of a lunatic he is. He does have this way of connecting with people.
His cult's bigger than ever. He gets more mail than any other prisoner. Like, his cult is worldwide, and we gave it to him.
Yeah.
You know, he acted like a crazy person in those trials, and we all watched it. He got what he wanted.
Yeah.
You know, his goal achieved.
And let's talk a little bit, just to close on Manson. What was his impact on the 1960s free love movement? Because we see this a lot, where he began as this hippie culture, you know, free love, free drugs, this free lifestyle, and it just devolved into absolute madness.
I'm obsessed with 1969. It's the coolest time period because it is the end of hippies. When I was doing a little bit of research for this, there's a 45-day span between John Lennon quitting the Beatles privately. It wasn't announced till later, but he told the Beatles he's out. The Manson Murders and Black Sabbath changing their name from Earth to Black Sabbath and recording their demo and playing live. We have the death of the Beatles, the death of free love, the death of the peace movement, and then we have the 70s, which is amphetamines, motorcycle gangs, Sabbath, metal, all this Blue Oyster Cult, all the end of cutesiness.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the Doors anymore. It's Sabbath. And that's kind of what Manson was. He changed the way we look at hippies.
And I think that America kind of used it as a cautionary tale. You know, you
The
kids
trip has
had your
gone
fun.
bad.
The trip has gone bad. Look at
Yeah.
what's happened, you know. And that is also probably why the trial was so publicized. And I would even say a little bit to this day. I would say that we use Manson as a cautionary tale. You know, girls, don't run away. You know, it's true. Do you
If
disagree?
you run away, you'll join Manson's cult.
Especially with drug use. You know,
Yeah.
it's the same sort of fear that I would hear from my dad. You know, where you would hear she joined a cult. Like we weren't talking about cults as a necessarily evil.
We talked about it into the 90s. We had cult panic in the 80s. We had satanic panic in the 90s. It became an American obsession for almost 30 years. We don't talk about it now because...
But Manson kicked that off.
Yeah, Manson was the popularizer of that. Manson shoved that in everyone's face. Sweet, white, brown-haired American girls destroyed, turned into murderers by drugs and sex and hippieism.
Yeah.
Like that's an after-school special that America loved and latched onto. That's an easy push. It's the coolest time period. Like LSD and weed are out, amphetamines are in. People are going crazy and paranoid, and San Francisco is not Haight-Ashbury anymore. You know, it's a scary place. It's the end of it.
Yeah. Wow. On that note, there's so much more we could talk about with regards to Charles Manson and his impact on history and murders in general, but we want to hear from you in the comment section below. What is your favorite or bizarre fascination with the Manson murders? Who should we talk about next on the show? Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Murder with Friends.